Congresswoman McKinney has a distinguished academic resume, served 5 years in the Georgia legislature and 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. In my opinion, she is more qualified and better prepared to lead our nation, empower our citizens, and restore our democracy than any other candidate.
My relationship with the Green Party began after I was elected to the Georgia House, and I introduced a piece of legislation that I thought represented radical common sense. And basically it provided for a way for us to, in the state of Georgia, to utilize any increase, a portion of that increase in the gasoline tax for mass transit facilities and systems, and to redefine transportation in Georgia to mean more than just roads and bridges. Well, I took my bill to the Speaker of the House, who at that time was the longest serving Speaker of the House and of any House in the United States, in any of our state legislatures. And I was so proud of my work. And he laughed. He literally laughed. And he laughed at the legislation. And probably, I guess, he was laughing at me too in my naivete, because I didn't realize the power of special interest lobbies and the power of those who build those roads. And so, of course, that legislation didn't go anywhere, but I think it was my first expression of green values. And then while I was in the Georgia legislature, I stayed up all night. It was the night that the bombs began to fall on Baghdad. And it looked like they were fireworks being exploded on my television. And had I not known that these were bombs that were killing people, I would have thought that it was beautiful. But it wasn't beautiful. And yet, and actually, it was yet again another intervention in a country of people of color that the United States seems to have done for a very long time. And so I wrote, as those bombs fell down, I wrote. I picked up my pen and I wrote all night. And I wrote what I thought and I wrote what I felt. And then the next day I went to the well and I asked for a point of personal privilege, which was granted to me by the Speaker. And I said, among other things, that George Bush ought to be ashamed of himself. At that point, my colleagues got up and walked out on me and were determined to make my life miserable in the Georgia legislature. It was very difficult for me after that with the things that were done, the targeting that was done. But I realized one thing, and that was that I wasn't really talking to my colleagues. I was talking to people beyond my colleagues. And people beyond my colleagues actually heard what I said. In fact, that was another example to me of having green values, the value of peace. So then I go to Washington, and September 11th, 2001 happens, and I ask a very innocent question, and that is, what did the administration know, and when did it know it, about the tragic events of September 11th? And of course, I was excoriated, vilified by all of the, what are called today mainstream media. But because, of course, we see that Snowshoe Films is here, I'm sure YouTube will get some of this. And now what is becoming mainstream are alternative media outlets who get the entire story out, uncolored by opinion. But that question reflected a request for the truth from my government. After having invested trillions of dollars in a military and an intelligence infrastructure, how could it fail 4 times on one day? That is a responsible question about the stewardship of our resources, about the primary mission of our federal government, which is to protect the American people. And so that, I think, was another expression of my green values, the value of truth. So it is important, I think, to understand that in the 2006 election cycle, I was the only Democrat who lost. Why was that? I think the members of the War Party were counting their votes very closely. They counted their votes and they knew that they needed 218 votes in the House to pass the war funding bill. Had I been there, I would have voted no. I was a sure no vote to continue the war funding. Had I been there, we would have a different discussion today because that bill would have failed. But I wasn't there. And so, as a result, those who wanted that vote to pass, it passed. And in addition to war funding passing, enabling the administration to spy illegally and unconstitutionally on American citizens also was enacted. The failure to repeal the Bush tax cuts, which were railed against so long and so vociferously by the Democratic minority in Congress, the failure to repeal the Patriot Acts, the Secret Evidence Act, the Military Tribunal Act, when the Democratic leadership supported funding the war and took impeachment off the table, that leadership then, on my birthday, March 17th, I declared my independence from that leadership. And at the Pentagon, I said that by voting to fund the war, that vote represented complicity. Complicity in war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes against the peace, torture. And so therefore, there was also complicity in every bomb dropped, every veteran maimed, every child killed. There's also complicity in all of the things that we as a country should not represent, and I know the American people do not represent. I would just conclude my response by this. George Washington, in his farewell address, warned the American people to beware the false patriots who usurp our values. Now I'm going to forget the quote. Who betray our values and at the same time wrap themselves in our flag. That was a warning that was delivered, gosh, how many years ago? And it's a warning that we need to heed. Just like Eisenhower's warning about every dime spent on these materials of war is in a very real sense a theft from those who are in need, our children. We have to remember what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that the United States has become, his country has become the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. And that he even had to break with civil rights leaders who, for whatever reason, thought they had to go along to get along with the administration, but that he was not going to segregate his moral concerns because he had fought so long against segregation. And that now the time had come for him to speak out against the war in Vietnam. There comes a time, or as Mario Savio said, when the machine becomes so odious that you can't take part. You can't even take part. And you have to say to the owners of the machine that either you will stop it or we will stop it. And Mario Savio was one of those who put his entire body against the gears and the levers and the wheels of the machine. And he said to those who own it that you have to stop it.